It was Saturday afternoon when the phone rang. I was tidying the living room, music playing softly, and sunlight streaming through the window. Everything seemed peaceful, but hearing my daughter's voice on the other end of the line made my body freeze. She was crying, sobbing, and barely able to speak. "Mom, I'm in the hospital." The phone nearly fell from my hand. My heart raced. "What? What happened, love? Talk to me." She gasped for air between sobs. "It hurts so much. I couldn't. I passed out, Mom." My feet locked on the floor. My instinct was to run to the car, but before I left, I tried calling my parents, who had been with her the day before. I needed to understand what had happened, but when I opened Instagram, I was shocked. They had just posted a photo, smiling in a coffee shop, as if nothing had happened. The caption read, "Enjoying Saturday, because life is now." The image pierced me like a knife. My daughter in the hospital, crying in pain, and my parents, smiling for the camera. The question burned. Where were they when she needed them? Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. I grabbed my keys with trembling hands and ran out of the house. The hospital was 18 minutes away, but that day, it felt like an eternity. My head was spinning, images of my baby daughter running around the yard flooding me like a hurricane. Fear crushed me inside. All I could think was, please God, let her be okay. When I arrived, I burst into the reception area like a bolt of lightning. I screamed her name, begged for me to go upstairs. When I finally found her, she was pale, curled up in bed, with a nurse at her side. My eyes filled with tears. "Mom," she said weakly. And there, in that moment, my heart broke in a way that never fully healed again. I sat beside her and held her hand tightly. "What happened, my love?" She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed fear. I started to feel a very strong pain. I screamed, "Mom." I called Grandpa and Grandma, but they didn't come. It cut me to the core. "What do you mean they didn't come?" "They were with you, daughter." She just shook her head sadly. "I think they were sleeping, or they left. I don't know." I was scared, Mom. I thought I was going to die. My hands were sweating coldly. I tried to understand what had really happened. I called my mom right away. She answered calmly, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Hi, honey. How are you?" I exploded. "You left your granddaughter alone in pain?" On the other end of the line, silence. Then my mother responded with a tone that was a mix of defensiveness and coldness. "She was sleeping when we left. We needed to breathe a little. She's 13, she knows what to do." My body trembled. "She ended up in the hospital. How can you be so irresponsible?" My mother sighed and said, "You always exaggerate," and hung up. I couldn't believe it. How could someone be so careless and yet so indifferent? I walked back to my daughter and watched her sleep, with an IV in her arm and a pained expression. I felt a burning rage in my chest. It wasn't just because of her pain. It was because of everything I'd swallowed for years, believing my mother to be a protective figure. At that moment, a movie played in my head. The times she'd told me I was weak for crying, that I needed to toughen up, that love was showing boundaries. I understood. This wasn't a one-day mistake. It was a pattern. And my daughter was reaping the same emotional neglect I'd experienced for so long. And this time, I wasn't going to let it go. I stayed with her until she fell asleep again. When the nurse returned, I asked, "Did you manage to reach anyone in the family?" She replied, "Only Samu." They said the girl was alone, crying on the floor. It was the neighbor who heard the screams and called. My throat tightened. My daughter could have died there, and my parents were taking a selfie. I returned home that night with my head spinning. My daughter was hospitalized for observation, and I could barely sleep. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, reliving every detail. It wasn't just anger. It was a pain that had been going on for generations. It was as if I'd seen, in real time, my own story repeat itself with her, and I refused to be complicit in it. The next morning, I took a deep breath and made a decision. I was going to confront my parents, not for revenge, but because something needed to change. They'd always been great at pretending everything was fine. They always knew how to smile and sweep mistakes under the rug. But now, there was a hurt child involved, and I wasn't going to be silent. I went to their house late in the afternoon. I arrived unannounced. My mother opened the door with a surprised look. "Hi, honey." But before she could finish, I walked in. "We need to talk. Now." My father appeared in the living room with that "you're overreacting again" look. I sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and began. You left my daughter alone, in pain, screaming. They tried to defend themselves. It was a misunderstanding. She was asleep when we left. You know how teenagers act out. But I didn't listen. For the first time, I looked them both in the eye and said, you have no idea the damage you cause, and you won't even admit it. My mother tried to interrupt. You've always been too sensitive. That's when I yelled, no, I was a child being ignored. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, they didn't have a ready answer. They couldn't laugh, downplay, or change the subject. I stood up. My daughter isn't your emotional responsibility. She won't inherit the traumas I've had. I let a lot slide before, but now it's over. And I left the house without looking back. In the car, my hands were shaking, but it was different from the anger at the hospital. This time it was a new strength. It was the courage of someone who decided to break the cycle, of someone who chose to protect what matters most, even if it means facing the people who raised you. It was painful, yes, but necessary. And in that moment, one thing became clear. From now on, I would do everything differently. In the following days, my daughter returned home. She was still in pain, but the worst was over physically. What worried me now was what remained inside. The fear in her eyes, the insecurity in her voice, the way she hesitated before asking for anything. She was on high alert, and it tore me apart, because it was the same look I had as a child. I sat with her on the porch one day. The sky was orange, but her eyes were gray. Daughter, do you want to talk about that day? She took a moment, but nodded. I thought I was going to die, Mom, and no one showed up. The words came out softly but sharply. The pain was horrible, but the worst part was feeling invisible. I choked back tears. You're not, and you never will be again. She asked me, have you ever felt this way before? I was silent. It was the question I'd always wanted to ask my mother, but never had the courage. I looked at her and said, more times than I care to remember, and that's why I'm here now, because I know what it does to us. She rested her head on my shoulder. We sat there, silent, for long minutes. I decided to put her in therapy. I didn't want to let scars turn into holes, and I went back to therapy too, not just for myself, but for her, because I understood that healing the past is the only way to protect the future. And if I wanted to break this cycle, I needed to do things differently. Stop pretending. Stop silently enduring it. Start saying, this hurts, period. Meanwhile, my parents texted, trying to justify it. It was just a scare. She's okay now, thank God. You've been through worse too. It was always like that. They exaggerated other people's pain, so they wouldn't have to face their own guilt. But now I saw clearly, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was negligence disguised as normality. I responded with a short text. My daughter almost died alone, and you were smiling for a camera. That says it all. After that, their silence was absolute. And for the first time, that silence didn't hurt me. It was a relief, because sometimes what we need most is distance from those we never knew were truly close. The weeks passed, and the dust began to settle. But inside, the mess was still huge. On the outside, I was functioning, taking my daughter to school, taking care of the house, working. But inside, there was a mixture of relief, anger, and sadness that was hard to explain. Because no matter how much I was doing the right thing hurt. It hurt much more than I imagined. One random night, I saw my daughter standing in the bedroom doorway. Mom, do you think I did something wrong? That caught me off guard. Of course not, honey. Why? She took a deep breath. The grandparents haven't called anymore. They haven't even texted. Are they mad at me? My heart sank, because that was the problem with silence. It turns into blame in the wrong ears. I sat with her on the bed. They're wrong, not you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us fail, and we need to know it's not our fault. She hugged me tightly. I just wish it hurts so much when they ignore us. I closed my eyes and held back the tears, because I understood. It was the same pain that had haunted me for years, and now it was my mission to prevent it from growing inside my daughter. In therapy, we talked a lot about boundaries, about how it's possible to love someone and still choose to walk away. My therapist said, "You're not breaking up with your parents. You're choosing your daughter." And I repeated that phrase every day, because it was easy to give in to the temptation to backtrack, to pretend everything was fine. But I'd done it before, and I wasn't going to do it again. One day, my mother showed up at the school gate, unannounced. She wanted to Just talk. I asked her not to, but she ignored me. She approached me on the way out and said, "You're taking my granddaughter away from her family." I took a deep breath and replied, "No, I'm taking my daughter away from the pain you pretend you don't cause." She cried, but this time I didn't hug her, because her tears weren't from regret. They were wounded pride. I turned around and got into the car with my daughter. She held my hand and asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled and replied, "I am now," because the greatest strength a mother can have is the courage to protect what she loves, even when it means facing those who taught her to love wrongly. And in that moment, I knew the storm was passing, and the sky, little by little, was beginning to open. Over time, my parents' absence stopped being a hole and became just silence. A silence that once hurt me, but now brought me peace. Our home felt lighter, safer, happier. Not because the pain was gone, but because it was now heard, validated, and cared for. And that changes everything. The energy shifted, and my daughter changed too. She started laughing more, trusting more. She started dancing around the house again, singing loudly in the shower, making up stories. It was as if, little by little, the wounded girl was healing. And seeing it, it healed me too. Because there's nothing more powerful than seeing your child blossom after a storm. It's living proof that the right love saves. But I also had to deal with pressure from family, uncles, cousins, even neighbors. You're being radical. They're your parents. Family is sacred. I listened, took a deep breath, and calmly responded. Family isn't about blood ties. It's about presence, responsibility, and true love. And if that's missing, the name family doesn't hold water. This silenced many. Others simply walked away. And I've learned to accept that too. Not everyone will understand your limits. Not everyone will support your choices. But when you're clear about why you're doing what you do, other people's judgments lose their power. I'd look at my daughter and remember, she's the reason. Her peace is the price of my steadfastness. And I'd pay that 1,000 times over if I had to. One weekend, we were at a park. She looked at me and said, "Did you know you're my best friend?" I laughed. "Really?" she replied. "Really, because I can tell you anything." That broke me inside. And I thought, this is it. Everything I wanted from my mother when I was little, I am now to my daughter. And that's worth more than any forced forgiveness. The pain of my childhood didn't disappear, but it became fuel to break the cycle. And my daughter? She's proof that we can rewrite our family's history, even if that means starting from scratch, even if that means moving on, without the one who should have stayed. A month later, I received an unexpected message. It was from my aunt, my mother's sister. "You need to stop this story. Your mother is very upset." I took a deep breath and counted to 10. She didn't ask how my daughter was. She didn't ask if I was okay. She only cared about the discomfort of the person who caused the pain. That said it all. I responded calmly but firmly. "My daughter almost died, and all you can see is my mother's pride?" The response was a long text, full of justifications, phrases like, "She did what she could," and "You're being cruel." The same old script, the same old attempt to reverse roles. But this time, it didn't affect me, because I knew the truth, and that was enough. I took the conversation to my therapist. It's natural that, when you break patterns, you upset those who benefit from them. That phrase kept ringing in my head. I wasn't ungrateful, as they said. I was a woman tired of carrying everyone's burden, of justifying the unjustifiable, of smiling while hurting. And now, I just wanted peace, even if it was a solitary peace. I talked to my daughter about it. She listened attentively. "Do you think they'll ever change?" A tough question. I answered honestly, "Maybe, maybe not. But we can't live waiting for someone to change and treat us the way we deserve." She nodded silently, and I saw maturity blossom there. Because sometimes pain also teaches. It shows us what not to repeat. During this time, we began to create our own traditions. Weekends at the park, pancake Sundays, playlists in the car, small things, but full of meaning. Things that didn't require false forgiveness or empty apologies. Just presence, just care, just real love. And curiously, that's what I always wanted from my parents, but never received. And then I understood. Maybe I'd broken the most silent pattern of all, the one of expecting little from love, the one of accepting emotional crumbs as a feast. And when that falls away, everything changes, because you begin to truly protect yourself and protect the one who came from you. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is more powerful than that. Life went on peacefully, until one day during my daughter's therapy, the psychologist called me in for a chat. I thought it was something clinical, some routine adjustment, but it wasn't. She looked at me carefully and said, "Your daughter wrote something, and she asked me to show it to you." She picked up a sheet of paper folded in 4. I opened it slowly. It was a letter, short but profound. "Mom, thank you for never leaving me alone, even when it felt like the whole world had disappeared. Thank you for believing in me, for listening to me, for protecting me, and most of all, for being different. I love you." The words tore me apart. I started crying right there, shamelessly. The psychologist offered me a tissue. "She's healing because you broke the pattern, and that is priceless." I walked home in silence, the letter in my bag, clutched to my chest. I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I never imagined the greatest gift of my life would come on a piece of paper scribbled on by a 13-year-old girl. But there it was, proof that what I'd done, even if criticized, judged, or misinterpreted, had been worth it. Everything. That night, we made popcorn and watched an old movie. We laughed a lot. We slept on the couch. Nothing extraordinary. But inside, everything was different. It was as if some of the pain had dissolved in her laughter. And I thought, this is it. It's not about winning arguments, proving points, forcing anyone to understand. It's about caring for the person who looks you in the eye and says, "I feel safe with you." My social media was silent. No sign of my parents or relatives. But for the first time, it didn't bother me. I didn't want war. I just didn't want to pretend anymore. And if that meant closing doors, then let them stay locked. Because the house I was building with my daughter had no room for someone who doesn't know how to truly love. And it was there, in that dark room with popcorn remnants on the floor, that I knew we were okay. Not perfect, not unharmed, but real, united, and with a kind of love that can't be asked for. It can be built. And that was, for me, the purest definition of family. 2 months passed without any contact. And then, like someone appearing after a storm pretending it never rained, I received a message from my mother. "We miss you. We want to see you." I read it over and over again. No apology, no mention of what had happened. It was as if the pain had been erased with a casual phrase. I showed it to my daughter. She read it, sighed, and asked, "Are you going to answer?" I asked her back, "Do you want to see them?" She took a moment to answer. Honestly, not yet. That helped me understand it wasn't just about me. She needed time too, respect, and most of all, emotional security. And I was going to guarantee that for her. I responded with something simple but firm. "Now is not the time. We're still recovering. I hope you understand." The silence that followed was predictable. No response, no sign of understanding. It was as if by setting a boundary, I had committed a crime. But I no longer felt guilt, only protection. And that was liberating. I told my therapist. She smiled and said, "You're educating not only your daughter, but your family as well, showing them what's acceptable and what's not." That stuck in my mind. For years I'd accepted the bare minimum. Now I was learning to say no, to not open doors that lead to the same old place, and to trust that if I ever reconnect, it will be with truth, not convenience. My daughter seemed lighter ever since. School was going well. The anxiety attacks disappeared. She went back to sleeping alone, without turning on the light. Small things, but for me they were huge. It was like seeing a flower bloom after winter. And all of this was only possible because someone had the courage to break the cycle. This time, it was me. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel pride. Not an arrogant pride, but the quiet kind that comes from sacrifice, from perseverance, from doing what's right, even when no one applauds. And there, sitting on the porch watching my daughter read in peace, I thought, if my parents never understand, that's okay. Because she understood, and that's enough. A few weeks later, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was from my father, a formal card, signed by him and my mother. 40th wedding anniversary. We're waiting for you in the little one. I stared at the paper for minutes. I didn't know whether to tear it up, keep it, or ignore it. I didn't know if it was a gesture of reconciliation, or just another attempt at appearances. I spent days thinking. I wondered, did they really understand? Or did they just want to avoid awkward looks? Talking to my daughter, she said, "I'm up for it if it means saying how I feel, but if it means pretending, I'd rather stay home." That was like a mirror to me. I too refused to pretend. But what if this was a chance to face everything head on? I decided to go, with her, but on one condition: truth. No forced smiles. No shallow, "How are you, dear?" We arrived at the hall, and as expected, everyone was wearing fake smiles. My mother came to hug us. My daughter took a step back. It was subtle, but clear. "Hi, Grandma." Her voice was polite, but distant, and I respected that. We sat in a corner, away from the dance floor. We watched everything. At one point, my mother approached. "Are you still hurt?" I looked her in the eyes. "I'm not hurt. I'm lucid. And that's worse for someone who's always hidden behind denial." She looked away, and I realized I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to be firm. We stayed for a short time. My daughter said, "Can we go?" And we did. No drama, no arguments. On the way back, she smiled. It was good to see that we don't have to be where we don't feel comfortable. I smiled back. Exactly. That wasn't a fresh start. It was an end. The end of waiting for change. The beginning of living in peace with the truth. And that day I understood. Sometimes healing comes silently. It doesn't need a stage, nor an audience. Just conscious choices. And when you choose to protect yourself and those you love, no one has the right to call you ungrateful. Because those who break a pattern carry the weight of generations on their shoulders, but also the chance to change everything. After that event, something inside me solidified. It was as if I had finally buried an old expectation, that one day, my parents would become what I always wanted. They remained who they are, and I chose not to wait any longer. For the first time, I was at peace with that, and peace, after so much conflict, is revolutionary. My daughter noticed this. She started asking me less about them, not out of contempt, but because she finally felt she didn't need the approval of someone who doesn't know how to love properly. She understood early on what took me years to accept. Love without responsibility is just ego, and family without care is just an empty name. She understood, and that made me proud. I started writing again. My texts began to gain traction. One of them went viral. The day my daughter screamed and no one came. Thousands of comments. People telling similar stories. Mothers, fathers, children. People who, like me, were learning to protect themselves even from their own parents. The pain was collective, but so was the courage. I was invited to speak at a women's support group. It was a small group at a community center. I told my story exactly as it happened. No embellishments, no heroics, just the truth. And when I finished, a woman said to me, "You did for your daughter what I could never do for mine. Congratulations." I cried, because in that moment I realized my story was bigger than me. I didn't want the stage or the applause. I just wanted other women to know, you can break the cycle, even when you're scared, even when you're alone, even when you're judged. You can protect your child and still maintain your sanity. We only need one thing, courage. And sometimes courage is simply saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. My daughter was waiting for me outside. When she saw me, she ran to me. "You were amazing, Mom." I smiled. "How do you know? You weren't even there." She replied, "I just know. Because I know you. And because today, I feel safe." And there, hugging her, I understood. There is no medal more valuable than a child's trust. Nothing in the world compares to it. Over time, everything calmed down. My parents' absence stopped being an open wound and became just a memory, a chapter, a lesson learned, and most importantly, a choice. They still existed. They still posted smiling photos. But now I saw it differently. It was just a facade, and I no longer lived a facade. I lived for real. My daughter is all grown up. Today she's 16, and sometimes I'm surprised by her maturity. One day she said, "When I'm a mother, I want to be like you." I almost cried. "Why?" I asked. She replied, "Because you protected me even from those everyone said were untouchable." That pierced me, because that was it. The legacy I wanted to leave. Emotional courage. It wasn't possessions, nor a surname, nor pretty photos. It was the certainty that she could protect herself, express herself, say what hurts, and trust that she would be heard. That's priceless, and it's something no generation before me has been able to let go of. But I did it. With effort, with pain, but I did it. And that's worth more than any forced forgiveness or convenient embrace. I started writing a book. I began recording everything. The mistakes, the silences, the cries that went unheard. I want my daughter to read it one day. I want other women to read it too. Because it's not just about me. It's about all of us. Those who were ignored, those who were disbelieved, those who survived and chose to love better. My parents remained distant. Every now and then they send a cold message. We hope everything is okay. I respond politely, but without opening doors. Because I've learned that forgiveness isn't about leaving everything the same. It's just about stopping the bleeding inside. And I stopped, because I chose to heal and teach my daughter to do the same. Now every night before I go to sleep, I look at my daughter and think, you're my chance to do everything differently. And she is. Every time she smiles, every time she trusts, every time she calls me mom lightly, I know it was worth it. All the pain, all the rupture, all the silence. Because in the end, loving right is the greatest act of revolution. Today, I look back without wanting to erase anything. Every silence, every stifled scream, every unseen tear, it all brought me here. To the moment I chose not to repeat. To the moment my daughter needed me, and I was there, whole, attentive, present. Something no one did for me, but that I chose to do for her. I learned that family isn't where you're born, it's where you're respected, where you can hurt without being punished, where you can make mistakes without being silenced. And sometimes the courage to break the cycle is seen as rebellion. But the truth? It's love. Love for you. Love for those who come after. Love for everything that can still be different. True love, the kind that doesn't hurt. My past still lives within me, but it no longer controls anything. I've transformed it into a warning, a lesson, a strength. And if one day my daughter feels fear, shame, or guilt, she'll know she can speak up. She'll know there's space, a listening ear, a comfort. Because pain that isn't heard becomes trauma, but pain that is embraced becomes a bridge. The greatest victory in this story wasn't proving anything to anyone. It was doing things differently, even with all the chances of repeating them. It was looking at the wound and deciding to heal it, not pass it on. It was saying enough when the easiest thing would have been to remain silent. And above all, it was seeing my daughter sleep peacefully knowing she was loved and protected completely. If you're experiencing something similar, don't blame yourself. Don't feel ungrateful, exaggerated, or rebellious. Sometimes protecting your peace requires pushing away the ones you most wanted around you. And that's okay. You don't have to accept pain disguised as tradition. Nor do you have to pretend everything's fine to keep your family name intact. Choosing the right love, even if it's lonely, is the beginning of true freedom. And if my parents ever ask why I walked away, I'll calmly answer, because one day, my daughter screamed in pain, and you didn't listen. And maybe they'll never understand, but I do, and so does my daughter. And in the end, that's all that matters. If this story touched you, share this video with someone who also needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and help this message reach those who need courage. Comment below where you're listening from. I'll read it all carefully. And remember, breaking the cycle hurts, but staying in it hurts much more. Thanks for sticking around. See you in the next story.